The morning sun rose gently over the royal palace and spread a warm glow across the wide stone yard where guards trained each day, and where footsteps echoed before the day fully began, and where every person who served the crown carried a sense of duty inside their hearts as they moved from one task to the next without delay or complaint, because the palace was not only a place of gold and stories but also a place of discipline and tradition that shaped everyone who entered its gates. Charlotte, the young princess of the realm, walked slowly across the yard with her hands clasped lightly, and her eyes calm as she looked around, because she enjoyed watching morning practice, and the quiet steps of the palace guards reminded her of steady rain falling on smooth ground, and she found peace in such gentle routines, even though she carried the heavy title of princess. She wore a simple blue dress tied at the waist with a thin ribbon, and though she belonged to the royal family, she often chose plain clothing because she felt more comfortable when others saw her as a person and not a symbol, and her modest behavior made many guards respect her deeply, though they said little out loud. At the far end of the yard stood Camilla, a new trainee who had joined the palace guard only a few weeks earlier, and carried herself with high confidence and sharp pride, because she believed she had great skill, and she wanted everyone to notice her presence whenever she stepped forward to train. Camilla practiced with a wooden staff, striking the air with quick swings and lifting her chin proudly each time she completed a movement, and when she saw Charlotte approaching she slowed, almost as if waiting for an audience, because attention fed the fire inside her, and she liked to show how strong and skilled she thought she was. Charlotte paused near the training circle, watching quietly and smiling kindly because she admired people who worked hard, and she never liked judging others before understanding them, and she valued the heart behind the effort more than the display of loud skill. But Camilla misread her soft nature and her calm expression, and she let her pride guide her words instead of manners, and she turned toward Charlotte with a smirk that held no warmth at all, her voice loud enough for everyone around to hear as she said, "Sit down, princess, you should not stand near real training." The yard fell quiet for a moment, and a few guards shifted uncomfortably because they had never heard such disrespect directed at Charlotte, who treated everyone with care, and who had never used her royal title to look down on anyone, and the sudden rude comment felt like a stone dropped into still water. Charlotte blinked slowly in surprise, but she did not raise her voice or show anger because such emotions were not in her nature, and she believed every situation could be handled with calm understanding. Before she could respond, a firm voice called out with strength that felt like a protective shield wrapping around the entire yard, and every guard immediately recognized the owner of the voice. "That is enough, Camilla." It was Mira, the captain of the Royal Guard, a woman known for her sharp judgment, steady posture, and deep loyalty to the crown, and also for her respect toward Princess Charlotte, who she often guided with patience and care. Mira stepped forward, her expression calm but unyielding, her eyes fixed on Camilla with a gaze that carried discipline rather than anger, and the simple strength in her presence made the young trainee straighten her back, as if realizing she had crossed a line she did not fully understand. "If you speak like that, you must be ready to support your words," Mira said with control in her tone. Camilla lifted her chin again, believing Mira was challenging her skill and not correcting her behavior, and she responded with a proud smile that hid her growing nervousness, though she pretended to stand confidently. "Support them, how, Captain?" Mira gestured to the wooden practice ring marked by smooth chalk and surrounded by racks of training tools. "A simple test of skill." The guards around the yard whispered softly because it was rare for Mira to personally step into a match, and even rarer for someone new to face her, especially someone who had spoken rudely to the princess right in front of her. Charlotte stood very still, her hands tightening slightly because she knew Mira was far more skilled than anyone else in the yard, and she did not want Camilla to feel embarrassed or overwhelmed, even though the trainee had brought this situation upon herself. Mira gave Charlotte a reassuring glance, the kind that silently said everything will be all right, and that she would handle this with fairness and respect, as she always did. Camilla walked inside the practice circle, and picked up a wooden staff from the rack, her movements sharp and fast as if she wanted to show she was completely unbothered, though a tiny flicker of tension appeared in her eyes when she looked at Mira, who walked toward the circle with calm, measured steps. Mira picked up her own staff, holding it lightly with one hand, as if it weighed nothing at all, as if she had done this countless times, and she took her place across from Camilla, her posture steady, her breathing controlled, and her expression unreadable in a way that made every guard in the yard hold their breath. Charlotte stood near the edge of the ring, her voice soft when she spoke to Mira. "Please be gentle." Mira gave her a small warm smile that reached her eyes. "Always for you, princess." A guard blew the training whistle marking the start of the match, and Camilla moved first, stepping forward with fast eagerness, swinging her staff toward Mira with the full belief that speed alone would impress the watching crowd. But Mira did not block or strike or stumble. She simply tilted her head slightly, letting the staff swing past her shoulder without any contact, and the movement was so smooth that gasps rose from the watching guards who had never seen someone avoid a strike with such ease. Camilla tried again, this time stepping with more strength and more force, but Mira raised her wrist, just enough to guide the strike away, gently turning it aside, as if she were redirecting falling water, rather than blocking an attack. Camilla pushed harder, each time her movements becoming less graceful, more rushed, more uncertain, and she realized slowly that none of her attempts were landing where she wanted, and no matter how she moved, she could not touch Mira, who remained calm, balanced, steady, and impossibly controlled. Charlotte watched with widening eyes, not out of excitement, but out of awe for Mira's effortless skill, and also out of concern for Camilla, who was now breathing harder while Mira had barely moved. In less than a minute, the difference between pride and discipline became clear to every single person watching, and even Camilla felt her confidence crumble as she understood that Mira was not defeating her with force but with experience, patience, and perfect control. The whistle sounded again, ending the match, and Mira immediately stepped back, offering the traditional respectful bow to her opponent. Camilla lowered her staff slowly, her breath uneven, her pride shaken not by injury, but by understanding that she had misjudged both her own skill and the people around her. The guards murmured softly among themselves, and the morning air settled once again into calm rhythm as Mira walked toward Camilla, and extended a hand not with triumph but with guidance, and the promise of a lesson she was ready to teach. Camilla stood inside the practice circle with her breathing uneven, and her thoughts swirling like wind caught in a narrow hallway, because everything she believed about her own strength had shifted in a single moment, and she felt a strange mix of embarrassment and surprise as she looked at Mira, who stood calmly in front of her with not a single sign of strain on her face or posture, even though she had just avoided every strike without any effort at all, and this quiet skill felt heavier than any loud display of power could ever feel. Mira kept her hand extended toward Camilla, waiting patiently, and her expression held no judgment, only a steady encouragement that invited Camilla to understand the real purpose of training and the real meaning of discipline, because Mira never used her strength to shame anyone, she used it only to guide them toward becoming better than they were before. Camilla slowly reached forward and took her hand, allowing Mira to help her stand straighter, and the moment their hands met she felt a grounded calm settle over her like soft earth, steadying her feet after a long stumble, and she lowered her eyes slightly. "Training is for learning, not for showing off," Mira said with a tone that was gentle but firm enough to sink into the heart. Camilla swallowed her pride and responded with a quiet, uncertain breath. "How did you make everything look so easy?" Mira lifted her staff slightly, then set it aside on the rack. "Calm mind and calm heart," she said, "and years of practice done with patience." Camilla looked down at the smooth ground of the circle, feeling the weight of her own hurried steps and rushed decisions. Her voice softened as she spoke again. "I spoke badly to the princess earlier." Charlotte stepped closer, her presence warm like the soft breeze that crossed the yard, and she shook her head gently. "You did, but people can learn and change when they understand their mistake." Camilla blinked in surprise because she had expected anger or disappointment, but instead she received patience and kindness that she felt she did not deserve. "You are not angry?" she asked with honest uncertainty. Charlotte smiled softly in a way that eased tension the same way sunlight eases morning chill. "No, I only want everyone here to treat each other with respect." Mira rested a hand on Camilla's shoulder, giving a slight nod of approval. "Charlotte is not just the princess, she is part of this place, and she trains with us, learns with us, and supports us without looking down on anyone." Camilla looked at Charlotte again with new understanding forming inside her, as she saw not a princess wrapped in silk and gold, but a young woman with steady hands and a kind heart who spent her mornings learning and working just like any other person. She felt a quiet embarrassment warm her face because she had judged Charlotte too quickly without learning who she truly was. "You train too?" Camilla asked softly. Charlotte nodded. "Yes, Mira teaches me when she has time." Camilla paused in wonder because she had expected someone of royal blood to avoid hard work, yet Charlotte stood in the yard with her gloves and training clothes ready to sweat and learn without complaint. The guards who had been watching the match now returned to their tasks, though whispers drifted across the yard like small leaves caught in passing wind, talking about Mira's skill, Charlotte's kindness, and Camilla's unexpected challenge. Mira stepped away from the circle and raised her voice just enough for the rest of the guards to hear. "Training continues for everyone. Return to your positions." The sound of feet moving across the stone floor filled the air again, and the yard came back to life as if the short test had only been a small pause in their routine instead of a turning point for one trainee who had just learned a lesson she would never forget. Camilla walked beside Charlotte toward the edge of the yard, her steps slower than before because she carried deep thought within her. Charlotte glanced at her and noticed the quiet shift. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. Camilla nodded, though her voice held a faint tremble. "I am just thinking about everything that happened." Charlotte folded her hands gently. "Mistakes help us grow, Camilla, and today was just one moment, not the whole story of who you are." Camilla stared ahead, feeling something settle inside her, like a piece of herself finding the right place after being out of line. They reached the shaded side of the yard where a stone bench sat under a tall tree with leaves that danced slowly in the mild breeze. Charlotte sat and Camilla hesitated before sitting beside her, unsure if she deserved to share the same seat, but Charlotte gave her a soft look that welcomed her without needing any words. For a moment they both watched the guards practicing across the yard, and the quiet rhythm of training created a peaceful background that allowed Camilla to speak honestly. "I wanted everyone to notice me," she said quietly, "because where I come from people only pay attention when you speak loudly or act boldly." Charlotte listened with full attention, not interrupting and not judging. Camilla continued. "I thought strength was about being louder than others, but I see now that real strength is quiet, like Mira strength that comes from inside." Charlotte smiled at the truth in those words. Yes, strength is steady and calm, not loud and rushed. Camilla looked at her hands, which still trembled slightly from the earlier practice. "I was wrong about you too, Princess. I thought you were someone who only watched from far away, but you are not like that." Charlotte shook her head lightly. "I do not like standing above people. I want to learn with everyone." Mira walked toward them again, carrying 2 small water cups which she handed to them both. "Drink and breathe," she said, "because training of the heart is as important as training of the body." Camilla accepted the cup with both hands as a sign of respect, and Mira nodded at her gesture. "Tomorrow you will train again with more focus," Mira said, "and this time you will begin by learning calm steps and quiet breathing." Camilla straightened with renewed purpose. "I will do my best." Mira smiled slightly, her rare warm expression appearing like a brief glow across her face. "That is all anyone can do." Charlotte looked at Camilla with sincerity. "If you want, we can train together sometimes." Camilla's eyes widened. "You would train with me?" Charlotte nodded. "Yes, I think it will help both of us learn better." Camilla felt her chest lighten with gratitude, because receiving kindness after behaving poorly was something she had not expected, and she silently promised herself she would not waste this chance. The sun rose higher, warming the stones and lifting the morning chill, and the training yard continued its steady heartbeat of movement as the palace guards worked with discipline, while Mira stood watching over them like a calm guardian of strength and order. Camilla looked at the yard with new eyes, seeing not a stage where she needed to prove herself, but a place where she could learn, grow, and become worthy of the uniform she wished to wear with pride. Mira stepped back toward the center of the yard and lifted her whistle, calling out the next set of drills, and once again the training rhythms echoed across the palace walls. Camilla stood from the bench ready to return to practice, and when she looked at Charlotte, she saw kindness steady as morning light, and she carried that warmth in her heart as she stepped back into the training circle, this time not to show off, but to understand what true strength meant. The next morning arrived with soft golden light spreading across the palace yard and touching the stone paths with gentle warmth as the guards prepared for another day of training and discipline, and even though the air still carried the fresh coolness of early dawn, there was already a quiet energy flowing through the place like a calm river ready to grow stronger. As the day moved forward, Camilla walked into the yard earlier than anyone expected, her steps slower than usual, but steady with purpose, and she held her staff in both hands, not with pride, but with respect, because her thoughts from the previous day had stayed with her through the night, and she knew it was time to let go of her old habits and begin again with a new mindset that honored the place she wanted to be part of. Charlotte stood near the wooden racks adjusting her gloves with her usual gentle patience, and when she noticed Camilla approaching, she offered her a small warm smile that eased the tension in Camilla's chest more than she expected. "Good morning," Charlotte said with soft kindness. "Good morning," Camilla replied quietly, her voice holding both respect and a hint of nervousness. Charlotte stepped aside to give Camilla space as Mira Approached from the far end of the yard, her steps firm yet calm, and her eyes scanning the yard like a guardian making sure everything stood in proper order. Mira stopped in front of the two young women, her posture straight, and her presence strong in the quiet morning air. "Today, you both will train together," Mira said with a nod, because learning grows faster when shared. Camilla felt a small wave of gratitude at Mira's words, and she bowed her head. "Respectfully, thank you, Captain, I will learn with full focus." Charlotte looked at Mira with a warm expression. "We will do our best." Mira handed each of them a wooden staff, then stepped back to watch as they moved to the center of the training ring with the early sunlight falling across their shoulders like a soft blessing. They began with slow movements, focusing on posture, balance, and steady breathing, and Camilla quickly realized how different this type of training felt compared to the fast rushed swings she used to rely on, because Mira's methods required patience, calm, and control, and every movement felt like a quiet conversation between the body and the mind. Charlotte moved with surprising steadiness, her steps gentle but precise, and even though she was not as experienced as Mira, she carried a grace that made her training flow like soft rhythm, and Camilla found herself learning from her just by watching her movements. "Breathe slow," Mira instructed from the side. "Calm the heart first, then guide the body." Camilla inhaled slowly, letting the morning air settle inside her, and she felt her heart steady itself with each breath, because the truth was she had been living with restless energy since she arrived at the palace, always afraid others would overlook her unless she spoke loudly or moved fiercely. Yet now she understood that true strength grew from silence as much as action. Charlotte noticed the shift in Camilla's breathing and spoke gently. "You are doing well, just keep your steps light." Camilla nodded, grateful for her encouragement, and she adjusted her posture following the quiet guidance in Charlotte's tone. For a long stretch they practiced this way, moving in steady patterns across the ring as Mira watched with thoughtful eyes and corrected small details with simple gestures that showed she believed in teaching through clarity, not pressure. When the first break approached, Mira signaled for them to rest, and both young women stepped outside the circle, breathing evenly though their bodies felt warm from the steady exercise. Camilla sat on the stone bench under the shade of the tall tree while Charlotte stood nearby, stretching her arms lightly, and for a moment they stayed silent, letting the cool breeze sweep across the yard and wash away any leftover tension. After a while Camilla spoke, her voice soft and honest. "I never thought training like this could feel peaceful." Charlotte smiled as she lowered her arms. "It becomes peaceful when you are not fighting yourself." Camilla considered that deeply, because for as long as she could remember she had been fighting inside her own mind, trying to prove her worth through noise instead of patience, and she realized now how exhausting that old habit had been. Mira walked over and stood beside them, her expression unreadable, but her presence calm. "Camilla, you are learning well today," Mira said, and Camilla felt a small spark of pride, not the loud sharp pride she once carried, but a warm grounded pride that came from real effort. "Thank you, Captain," Camilla replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Charlotte stepped closer with a gentle smile. "You are improving fast." Camilla lowered her gaze slightly, feeling shy at the praise, but she also felt stronger inside because she was beginning to understand how important humility was in this place. When the break ended they returned to the training circle and Mira introduced new movements, ones that required both of them to work together in a pattern that moved like a slow dance of balance and cooperation. Camilla held her staff steady as Charlotte stepped forward, swinging lightly, and Camilla redirected the movement with care, making sure not to apply force or rush the motion, and then Charlotte repeated the pattern from the opposite side, giving Camilla space to practice the technique. At first Camilla struggled with the timing her steps, either too early or too late, but Charlotte guided her with gentle voice corrections and Mira adjusted their postures with precise gestures. "Try not to chase the movement," Mira said, "guide it with intention." Camilla nodded and tried again, this time letting her breath lead her steps instead of her urgency, and the movement flowed smoother like a soft wave moving through calm water. Charlotte smiled as she noticed the progress. "That was better, you are getting it." Camilla felt relief bloom inside her chest because she wanted to grow, wanted to let go of the old pride that caused mistakes, and wanted to honor the kindness Charlotte and Mira had shown her. As the sun climbed higher, the yard filled with more warmth and the sound of training echoed gently across the stone walls, while Camilla continued practicing with Charlotte until her steps felt more natural and her grip more controlled. Mira watched them for a long moment, then spoke with approval. "You both are learning quickly. Remember, training is not about winning, it is about understanding." Camilla nodded with sincerity. "I understand more today than I ever did before." Charlotte gave her a gentle, encouraging look. "You will learn even more." With time Camilla felt a real sense of belonging begin to grow inside her, something she had never felt during her earlier days in the palace, because back then she had been too focused on herself to notice the strength of the people around her. After finishing the partner drills, Mira instructed them to practice slow defense patterns on their own, letting each movement settle in their muscles and minds, and Camilla found that she no longer felt the rush to impress anyone. She felt only the desire to train properly and grow with patience. Charlotte practiced nearby, moving with steady grace, and Camilla realized how deeply she respected her because Charlotte's kindness was not weakness but a quiet strength that inspired others when training. Ended for the morning. Mira dismissed the guards with a nod, and the yard began to clear as people moved toward their midday duties. Camilla and Charlotte walked together across the yard, and the atmosphere between them felt easier than before, filled not with tension or doubt, but with mutual understanding. Camilla spoke softly, "Thank you for helping me today." Charlotte smiled. "We help each other, that is what training is." For Camilla felt warmth in her chest at those words, and she realized she no longer saw Charlotte as a distant princess but as someone whom she could walk beside with respect and trust. As they reached the entrance of the training hall, Mira approached them once more, her steps slow and her expression steady. "Tomorrow we continue," she said. "I expect the same focus and heart." "Yes, Captain." Camilla and Charlotte answered together. Mira nodded with approval and walked away, leaving the two young women standing in the gentle sunlight, feeling stronger than they had at the start of the day. Camilla took a slow breath and felt gratitude settle deep inside her because she knew this place would shape her into someone better, someone calmer, someone worthy, and she felt ready to face the next day of training with new hope in her heart. The next day arrived with soft, early light stretching over the palace roofs and falling across the training yard like a warm blanket, and as the guards gathered slowly, the gentle sounds of practice tools being lifted and feet stepping on stone filled the air with a peaceful rhythm that signaled the beginning of another day of learning and discipline. Camilla walked into the yard with steady breathing and calm steps, and though she had once arrived with pride and loud confidence, her presence now felt grounded and thoughtful, as if she carried a new purpose inside her chest, and each breath she took made her feel more certain about the path she wished to follow. Charlotte stood near the training bench, tightening the straps of her gloves with focused hands, and when she looked up and saw Camilla, her face lit with a warm smile that spread kindness through the cool morning air. "Good morning," Charlotte said gently. "Good morning," Camilla replied with a softer voice than before, but one filled with sincerity and hope. Mira approached from the far side of the yard, carrying a wooden staff in each hand, and her posture tall as always, and the moment she stepped into the sunlight, her presence seemed to bring both order and comfort to the people around her, because Mira was a figure who carried calm strength without raising her voice or changing her expression. "You both will train again together today," Mira said as she handed them each a staff, beginning with steady footwork and balance. Camilla nodded firmly, her hands steady around the wooden staff, and Charlotte gave Mira a grateful nod before stepping beside Camilla, ready for another day of shared effort. They stood inside the practice ring, and the morning breeze brushed softly against their faces, while Mira stepped aside to observe their movements with her calm, sharp eyes. Charlotte began the first pattern with graceful steps, and Camilla mirrored her movements with careful focus, making sure her feet landed gently, and her shoulders stayed relaxed, because she had learned how much smoother everything felt when she moved with calm intention rather than rushing with pride. "Keep your breath steady," Mira said from the side as the two young women repeated the pattern guide, "the movement, do not chase it." Camilla inhaled slowly and let the breath guide her steps, and she found that the more she focused on her breathing, the smoother her motions became, until her staff glided through the air with a quiet rhythm that matched the soft rustle of leaves above them. Charlotte noticed the improvement, and her smile grew warm with encouragement. "You are doing well, Camilla, just keep the movement soft." Camilla nodded and adjusted her steps again, feeling the weight of the staff balance in her hands, and realizing how different this training felt compared to the rushed, prideful routines she used to rely on. For a long while they practiced in silence, except for the occasional instruction from Mira, who corrected small details with steady patience, and guided them toward movements that built control and harmony rather than tension. When the first break arrived, Mira raised her hand, and the two young women stepped out of the circle, breathing lightly, though their bodies felt comfortably warm from the training. "Let us rest," Mira said as she walked toward the shaded bench beneath the tall tree, where sunlight peeked through the branches in soft patterns. Charlotte sat with a relaxed sigh, while Camilla sat a moment later, her posture straight, but her expression thoughtful, as she watched the guards around the yard, practicing with focus and calm. After a few breaths, Camilla spoke. "I feel like I am understanding more each day." Charlotte turned to her with gentle interest. "About training or about yourself?" Camilla looked down at her hands resting on her knees. "Both, I think." Charlotte listened without interrupting, allowing Camilla to gather her thoughts. Camilla continued with a soft voice. I used to believe strength needed to be loud. I thought if I was not showing off people would ignore me, but now I see how wrong that thinking was. Charlotte nodded slowly. Quiet strength lasts longer, it grows deeper. Camilla lifted her gaze toward the training circle. You are quiet but strong in a way I did not see before. Charlotte smiled shyly. I only try my best. Just then Mira approached with 2 small cups of water, her steps steady, and her expression calm as she handed a cup to each of them. Drink and breathe, Mira said, because learning needs rest too. Camilla accepted the cup with both hands, showing respect, and Mira gave a small approving nod before taking a step back to watch the yard with thoughtful eyes. After the break, Mira signaled for them to return to the training circle, and this time she introduced a new pattern that involved teamwork, balance, and trust, as both young women had to move at the same rhythm without pulling ahead or falling behind. Begin slowly, Mira instructed. Feel the movement of the other person and match your steps. Charlotte started the pattern with a forward glide of her staff, while Camilla shifted into her matching stance, their movements like soft waves meeting in the same direction, and their breathing rising and falling in steady unity. At first Camilla struggled with the closeness of the timing because she feared she might slow Charlotte down, but Charlotte maintained a gentle pace and gave Camilla small reassuring glances whenever she felt uncertain. Follow the breath, Charlotte whispered. Camilla inhaled deeply and let her exhale guide her next step, and slowly their movements aligned more naturally until they moved in a smooth, careful rhythm that made Mira give a slight nod of approval. Better, Mira said, your teamwork is steady. The words filled Camilla with a warm sense of accomplishment, not the sharp pride she once chased, but a calm satisfaction that settled deeply in her heart. They continued practicing until the sun rose higher, warming the yard and leaving shimmering patterns of light on the stone floor, and by the time Mira signaled another rest, Camilla felt her muscles warm, her breathing even, and her mind clearer than it had ever been during training. As they stepped away from the circle, Charlotte stretched lightly and looked at Camilla with admiration. You have improved so much since yesterday. Camilla felt her cheeks warm with quiet gratitude. Thank you, I want to become better. Charlotte nodded warmly. And you are. Their shared smiles grew as the breeze brushed gently across the yard, carrying the soft scent of morning flowers from the palace gardens nearby. After the short break, Mira led them through a final set of movements focused on balance and awareness, and Camilla found herself moving with confidence she never knew she could feel without raising her voice or trying to prove anything to anyone. When the training session finally ended, Mira gathered the guards together for brief instructions about the upcoming palace ceremony, where the guard teams would assist with arrangements, decorations, and safe passage for visiting families. Charlotte and Camilla listened closely as Mira assigned roles and responsibilities, and when she reached their names she gave them a task that required cooperation and trust. You two will manage the walkway preparations for the ceremony, Mira said. Your teamwork today shows you can handle it. Charlotte smiled with quiet excitement. We will do our best. Camilla nodded firmly. We will not disappoint. Mira dismissed everyone, and the guards began moving around the yard, gathering tools, carrying boxes, and preparing for the ceremony that would take place in the main courtyard. Charlotte and Camilla walked side by side through the palace hall, carrying folded banners and decorative ribbons, and the atmosphere between them felt steady, comfortable, and full of new understanding. Camilla glanced at Charlotte as they walked and spoke softly. Thank you for helping me learn. Charlotte shook her head gently. We helped each other. Camilla felt warmth settle in her heart at those words because she had spent too long trying to stand alone, and now she realized how much stronger she felt walking beside someone who believed in her. As they stepped into the bright courtyard, the sun shone warmly across the stone paths, and the day felt filled with promise and new beginnings, and Camilla knew she was becoming someone new, someone calmer, someone stronger through patience, teamwork, and kindness. The palace courtyard filled slowly with warm afternoon light as people moved across the open space, carrying ribbons, golden fabrics, polished lanterns, and delicate decorations meant for the ceremony that would take place later that day, and the entire area felt alive with soft footsteps, gentle voices, and the rustle of banners being lifted into place as the royal guards and palace workers prepared the scene together with calm, steady teamwork. Charlotte and Camilla walked side by side, holding long folded banners between them, and even though the courtyard buzzed with activity, their steps matched easily, as if they had spent many years practicing together instead of only a short time, and this quiet harmony between them grew naturally from the trust they had built through training. Camilla looked around at the busy workers feeling a mix of excitement and responsibility because she wanted to do well and she wanted Mira to see that she had learned and changed and she wanted Charlotte to feel proud of their shared task. Charlotte guided her toward the long front walkway where many guests would pass during the ceremony, and the sunlight made the pale stones of the path shine like gentle silver as they began laying down the banners with care, smoothing them so they rested without a single crease. "Hold your side a little higher," Charlotte said softly as they stretched the fabric carefully. Camilla lifted her end, and the banner settled smoothly into place, and Charlotte smiled with quiet approval that filled Camilla's heart with warm confidence. "You are getting good at this," Charlotte said. Camilla breathed deeply, feeling grateful for the kind encouragement, and she placed another ribbon along the walkway, tying it around a decorated pole with steady hands. Across the courtyard, Mira watched silently with her arms folded, and her expression calm but proud, and each time her eyes followed Charlotte and Camilla, she felt a deep assurance that both young women were growing stronger in their own ways. A group of guards passed carrying wooden stands for lanterns, and one of them paused, noticing the careful work Charlotte and Camilla were doing, and he nodded respectfully before continuing his task, and for the first time since arriving at the palace Camilla felt that she truly belonged. Charlotte crouched near the ground, adjusting a small golden thread that had slipped from one of the banners, and Camilla bent beside her to help, their hands moving with gentle precision. "This looks beautiful," Charlotte said in a soft, approving tone. Camilla smiled shyly. "We make a good team." Charlotte nodded warmly. "Yes, we do." As they continued working, a soft breeze drifted through the courtyard, making the hanging ribbons flutter gently like soft wings, and the sound of light laughter came from the far side where a few workers were arranging flower baskets, and the peaceful atmosphere wrapped around the courtyard like a warm blanket. After finishing the main walkway, Charlotte and Camilla carried a box of lanterns toward the entrance arch where they would hang the lights for the evening glow, and Camilla held the box carefully as Charlotte lifted each lantern one by one, handing them up toward the hooks above. Camilla reached up to help, and together they placed the lanterns in a gentle line that created a soft curve of light across the arch, and when they stepped back to check their work, they both smiled at how well it looked. "This is coming together nicely," Charlotte said. "Yes, it feels good to see our work shine," Camilla replied with honest happiness. Mira approached them, then walking with her steady, calm steps, and she paused to look at the decorated walkway and the lanterns above. "Good work, Mira," said her tone even but warm. "You both worked with focus and heart." Camilla straightened proudly, though her pride now felt soft and steady instead of loud and heavy. "Thank you, Captain." Charlotte smiled toward Mira. "We enjoyed doing this." Mira nodded once and turned to address a few workers who needed direction, leaving the two young women to continue their tasks. As the sun moved lower in the sky, the courtyard brightened with warm orange light, and Camilla and Charlotte carried more decorations, tying gentle patterns of gold and blue along the sides of the path, while guards set up polished shields and tall spears as ceremonial symbols rather than tools. Camilla wiped a small bead of sweat from her forehead and breathed in the warm air, feeling the joy of being useful and the peace of working with friends instead of standing apart, and she felt her old habits slipping away like sand washed gently by water. Charlotte noticed her thoughtful expression and asked softly, "What are you thinking?" Camilla paused before answering. "I am thinking about how different I feel. I used to want everyone to notice me, and now I just want to work well and help others and be someone, Mira, and you can rely on." Charlotte smiled warmly as she adjusted another ribbon. "You already are someone we can rely on." Camilla felt a soft ache of gratitude inside her chest because such words meant more to her than she could explain, and she knew she would never forget them. Soon the last of the decorations were placed, and the courtyard shimmered with gentle beauty as the lanterns hung in perfect lines, the banners rested smoothly along the walkway, and the spear stands glowed in the sunlight. Workers stepped back admiring their efforts, and guards gathered near the edges of the courtyard, waiting for Mira's final instructions. Mira stepped into the center and raised her hand, signaling quiet, and her voice carried with steady command. "You all worked well, and with discipline the courtyard is ready for the ceremony, and I am proud of every one of you." Her eyes paused on Charlotte and Camilla, and she gave a small approving nod that made both young women feel a deep calm pride in their hearts because they had earned it through patience, teamwork, and respect. The workers spread out to their designated places, and the guards took their ceremonial positions while Charlotte and Camilla stood together near the entrance, ready to guide guests when they arrived. As the first visitors entered the courtyard, their faces lit with admiration at the decorations and the peaceful glow of the lanterns, and some whispered softly about how lovely everything looked, and Camilla felt her heart swell with accomplishment. Charlotte leaned closer and whispered, "We did well today." Camilla nodded. "Yes, very well." More guests arrived, and the courtyard filled with gentle conversation and soft steps, while the evening breeze rustled the banners and made the lanterns sway slightly like tiny stars hanging in the air. Even as the ceremony began, Camilla found herself looking at Charlotte with quiet gratitude, thinking of how far she had come since the day she had spoken sharply without understanding, and how much she owed to Charlotte's patience and Mira's guidance. Charlotte noticed her glance and smiled. "I am glad we became friends." Camilla felt her heart warm as she replied, "I am glad too." The sound of music drifted softly across the courtyard, while lanterns began to glow brighter as the sky slowly changed from warm amber to soft blue evening, and the decorations shimmered gently under their light. As the ceremony continued, Camilla stood tall beside Charlotte, both of them carrying themselves with calm strength and steady respect, and the day felt like a gentle promise of the future they would share in the palace as companions, students, and members of a place that had taught them so much. When the final moment of the ceremony passed, and the courtyard settled into quiet again, Camilla looked at the walkway they had decorated, the lanterns they had hung, and the calm glow that filled the evening air, and she felt a deep, lasting peace. She had arrived at the palace wanting attention, but she was staying because she found meaning, purpose, friendship, and strength that grew quietly inside her. Charlotte stood beside her, watching the lanterns sway. "It is beautiful," Charlotte whispered. "Yes," Camilla replied, "it truly is." And together they walked into the soft evening light, ready for the next day and the many lessons still ahead.